live. Welcome to another episode of Command Control Power. Good to see you, Jerry. It's just me and Jerry today.
That's right. I think Sam is actually, if you look at my live photograph here, he's standing off in the distance somewhere.
I see him there, through the leaves.
Sam.
Yeah, nice, He's I think on location, reporting from the field somewhere, but or maybe literally the field if you look at your photo there. So Jerry, I wanted to chat with you. I know you have some new hardware to discuss. Always an exciting time. And speaking of new, we saw recently that Apple changed their online store. So they changed the way the online store basically works. I have not heard any of our usual favorites discuss this yet. One particular observation that I have, they've mentioned the new store, that kind of thing, but I haven't heard anybody mention the URLs. I'm thinking of, Accidental Tech Podcast and, John Gruber's show and things like that. They usually comment on a lot of the same things we notice in the field. One thing I noticed was I was speccing a 14-inch MacBook Pro M5 Max 8 terabyte model for a client, which is a super maxed out machine, very expensive model, but she actually needs all that space, photographer client. And when I spec'd it out, before I put it through her custom store, I did it through the Apple online store, the usual way that, anybody at retail buys hardware. And a big improvement there is that when you adjust all those settings, you go down the list from, choose your color. You gotta choose a color first. It's really important. Choose your processor, all the different features. As you go down the list, if you copy and paste that URL, all of your choices are actually embedded in that URL now, which is new. That was not the case in the past. So I used to have to go in and I used to select print out the
cart.
Exactly. And I would, either print the cart or like just copy and paste the kind of list of specs. So I would either way, just like show them like, here's what you need. But a lot of clients had trouble with that. They would find their way to something else and send it to me and say, is this right? And then I'd be comparing what I meant to send them with what they sent me. Now I'm double checking their work basically. Even more frustrating, it used to be that you'd have to select a model. So like either the base, MacBook Pro M5 or MacBook Pro M5 Pro or whatever. And moreover, you'd have to select the color at the very beginning. And the link you would send the client, like here, start with this link and then choose 24 gigs of memory and choose 1 terabyte storage, whatever the choices were. You'd give them those instructions, but you had to send them a link to the model that had a certain color chosen that I ended up choosing for them because I didn't always know what color they preferred, so I just kind of make something up. Okay, silver. Now all of that goes away because you send them a link and right in the URL, it has, apple.com/shop/buy-mac/MacBook Pro 14-inch base black standard display Apple M5 Max chip 18 core So it's all this like one long string. So I can send them that link. They get to the landing page with exactly what I configured. And if they want to change the color, they can just change the color right there. So really much better user experience when you're sending, whether it's clients or your family and friends, these, recommendations, it's just better on both sides. So big improvement. I really appreciate it.
I had no idea this existed. I just did it as a test because I didn't believe you.
Right. Why would you believe me?
And that's fantastic because like we were saying, you would print out the cart and I would have to make sure that if I printed the PDF that I was going to email to them, I had to expand out the little disclosure triangle so all the details would show up. And sometimes I would have to annotate the PDF and put arrows next to, no, you want 24 gigs of RAM, not, you need a 1 terabyte drive. Make sure you have to select those. So the fact that, like you say, you could one URL is amazing.
It's really great. Makes a big improvement just with that process that we do, like, I don't know, once a week or once every, couple of weeks for random clients or whoever. Right. So, really
I would think Apple too, from a tracking standpoint, there's probably an easier way for them to, this is an easier way for them to track, how many of this particular configuration they sold versus having to pull the order information in some other way. I would think this would be a much easier way for them to parse these details for statistics. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, they're also getting new statistics, like which ones are being recommended, regardless of what gets bought, what URLs are people landing on?
Loading on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What loads up. Yeah.
exactly. This looks like a popular configuration. Maybe we should
Hmm.
offer a discount on this or whatever it
Hmm.
is. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, speaking of the new Apple Store methodology, I guess you got to exercise that live recently. How did your new purchase go?
Yeah. Well, I have was using for last couple of years an M3 MacBook Air, and with 24 gigs of RAM, and
Hmm.
that 10 core GPU, I guess. And my philosophy is you get a pretty good trade in value. I think it's like $550 for it. And if I waited another year on it, it would just get that much older, and it might be worth a little bit less in value, maybe
Right.
450, maybe 350. So with that trade in, it was just a small amount of payments a month, and I always do the financing at
Hmm.
0% because
Yep.
using Apple's money. So I think I'm paying them something like $60 a month.
Nice.
And so yeah, so the migration went great, um, and I used a Thunderbolt cable, maybe not the fastest Thunderbolt cable.
Hmm.
And I want to talk to you about that, doing remote migrations with Thunderbolt cables, because I had one that
Yeah.
recently happened with a brand new MacBook Pro that we onboarded for a client.
Hmm.
And it's still in progress because we tried to do the migrations several times
Hmm.
over Wi-Fi. It failed.
Hmm.
I had him order up a Thunderbolt cable that
Okay.
Justin Escar recommended on Slack, because I shouted out and the folks on
Nice.
Slack chimed in. And yeah, Justin said, get this Anker cable.
Oh yeah.
And so I got that. He ordered it up. We tried the cable. We tried multiple ports. It was failing, failing, failing. And we
Wow.
were starting with the the preferred procedure that you typically recommend, where you create a dummy admin account and you make
Yeah.
sure that both computers are completely on the same playing field in terms of the OS, and then running the migration. So my question to you is,
Yeah.
have you had any problems with these
Yeah.
remote migrations?
Yes, I
And
have.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so just not to bury the lead. So now we're waiting on him receiving a 1 terabyte hard drive, and that's the way we're going to do it.
Oh
And we
wow.
should have,
Okay.
yeah,
Third worker, or I guess a third method there, second
yeah,
workaround.
yeah.
Yeah, so I had one just last week. Client was migrating from a Ventura Mac, like running,
Hmm.
13 something. I think it was fully patched, so whatever that is, 13.7.8, I think. MacBook Pro, like, good model at the time, but
Yep.
just a year or so past its kind of like useful life.
Same way with him.
Yeah, not crazy. Like it's
Hmm.
within that window where you say, okay, you really should upgrade, and it's it's fine, but they're skating by with no security updates, so there's always a little bit of a question mark of what's the state of this machine. But for the most part, like any Mac that anybody is migrating from these days typically has an SSD, which to me always makes the migration go more smoothly. It's certainly much faster. I think they're more reliable. So my process is like you said, we create the temp user on the new Mac. I
Hmm.
walk them through the initial setup. A lot of times they jump the gun. So I'll tell them, we're going to start by opening the box together. Or, if you
Hmm.
want to open the box and put it on your desk, fine. But we're going to go through the initial setup together.
Sure.
And by the way, to some of our colleagues out there, this sounds like the Stone Ages to do like a manual setup of a machine because everybody's using automated device enrollment and so on. But there's an economy of scale where automated device enrollment makes sense, like
Hmm.
above 10, 15, 20 Macs in an organization when they're going to be turning over Macs every 3 years or whatever it is. Yeah, great. Put the few hours of work into getting all of this set up for automated device enrollment, and then you can rely on that methodology. Mac turns out to be supervised. There's lots of benefits to that. But for certainly home users like you and I deal with sometimes, or even small businesses, we go through the same process of, if it's a business client, we walk the employee through,
That's right.
turn it on, create a temp user. That temp user gets deleted later. It's just to get us connected. We walk them through getting to the desktop, skipping as much as possible. So they're not going to sign into their Apple account. They're not going to configure Touch ID or turn on, Apple Intelligence or any of that stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, turn on time zone support. That's helpful. Location services, I should say, so that we can get the correct time zone. But everything else, you just skip right to the desktop. Now you're in the desktop, so you go to our special URL, you download the configuration profile, you enroll in Adigy in our case. And so we have just a temporary like Adigy policy that's used for these migrations just to get us connected remotely. Because as I've mentioned in the past many times, that allows us to stay connected unattended, so you don't have to like walk them through reconnecting at any point in time, and you can oversee the migration. Most of the time, depending on, I think more so the source machine, maybe something with the network, you can maintain the connection through the migration, or like after the migration just gets started, then it'll change to show, rather than like connection over Wi-Fi, it'll switch to like a peer-to-peer connection. And when it does that little switching thing, you'll lose the remote access, and
That's right.
you talk to the client and say, okay, what does it say? Does it give you a time estimate? So this is our process. So we got through all those steps last week with this client coming from the Ventura Mac, switching to a brand new MacBook Pro, and it got like an hour into the migration. It was estimating originally 3 hours. It got to an hour in, and it was estimating about an hour remaining. So this is what you also normally see, is like it'll speed up over time. So it went through all of that. It was doing the direct connection. It was in process. It had moved a lot of data, something like 140,000 files or whatever these crazy numbers are, and she called and said, yeah, it's stuck. And I think it was the new Mac says, it pops up a little window over the migration assistant window, and it says reconnecting, attempting to reconnect, whatever. So at some point, the old Mac, stopped talking to the new one. The new Mac couldn't see the old one anymore. And we've seen this initially where they might have trouble connecting to each other for some reason. Like maybe in your case, you had some initial hiccups. That's one form of like an issue. I was surprised in this case that we got most of the way through, like halfway through, and then it just, I don't know what happened. It got interrupted. So the way I solved that, I don't know what worked exactly, but I had to basically start over. So I restarted both machines. I noticed that she had Sophos installed on the old Mac, antivirus and whatever, probably some kind of firewall. So I uninstalled that, restarted. I ended up having trouble getting in using Live Desktop. Not sure what was going on there. I waited a little bit, removed and re-enrolled the machine. No problem. Now I'm in. Started the migration. So this is now, attempt number 2, and it worked. So no change other than just I removed Sophos. But again, like I don't even think that was related, because if that was going to interfere, I would have thought it would have interfered right from the start, just preventing the connection in the first place.
But just to be clear to our listeners, you have to start over. It's not like you can pick up where you left off. Right. So you have to log back in the machine. And what happens during that transition period of that failed migration, the user name actually exists. Yes. So you have to go in and log in as the temporary admin, remove the user, and then start it all over again. In our case, we saw it sometimes go to peer-to-peer. We saw it sometimes on Wi-Fi. When it was on Wi-Fi, it just lost the Wi-Fi connection. So I'm thinking, and what you're saying as well, is it could be that these are home users, at least it was in my case, and maybe, we don't supervise their router. It could be the lease time on the router. That's what I'm thinking. The DHCP lease.
1 hour lease, and then it expires.
Yeah. And so, but I was really baffled and really frustrated, because I spent a long time with the client, and you can't say, well, you owe me 2 hours of my time because all this failed.
Yeah. I mean, I comped a lot of time on that one, because there was the struggle to re-enroll the machine. There was the whole thing, the second migration attempt. Also, in some cases, these clients, when they go a year past the prime of that Mac, and, we've been recommending whatever, and then we get these hiccups, sometimes I do say, like, you know what? I mean, this is the cost. This is the time it takes. I mean, would it have been better if we had been there in person? I don't think so. I mean, it's not as efficient to like go there, charge them for travel, sit and struggle in person. The clock is running the whole time. Maybe you get to that second attempt a little sooner, but you still don't know if it's going to work. So do you hang around? Like it's so, it is what it is. I mean, this is the process, and what they're paying for is the fact that you're struggling and not them, and they don't have to go to Apple and come back with a machine that's, maybe they still have some setup to complete at that point, and it's partially done kind of thing. So we're giving them that extra service, and sometimes it takes a little extra effort from us.
Yeah. It was frustrating. And I'm sorry you had the problems, but and now I realized that I was supposed to hear from the client yesterday, when the drive was supposed to arrive, and he's gone radio silent. So I think he's actually missed his window to return his machine. I messaged him a couple of days ago, and I had a number of personal things going on, so I didn't get a chance to follow through on that. But I told him, you need to call Apple and explain what happened and get that return, because he was going to trade in his Mac. And I think they use a third-party partner to do that, right? To do those evaluations. Apple's not doing this. Apple employees aren't doing this somewhere. But just to close the loop on the M5 MacBook Air, it runs about the same. It's a touch quicker.
Nice.
I mean, I haven't done any processing, like working with audio files. That's typically what I do sometimes with the show. I don't really work with video files. So I just noticed it being just a little bit zippier, but for the most part, I could have probably gotten along just the same with the M3.
I'm sure, but like you said, to be able to recoup like maybe half the price or close to it of the new Mac, it seems like a perfect window to do that. And I wish somebody had this charted out. Maybe somebody does, but there's probably a sweet spot where you get the maximum value for your Mac. Like you're saying, next year you're going to lose $100 a year or more at that point. So it made sense to re-up now, and then you can ride this one for a few years at least. It seems like a really nice upgrade. I was tempted to get the same machine, the MacBook Air, with the M5 regular. It's no Pro or Max options there. I think their base chip is really like a great design, great balance between power, like for the stuff you need power for, performance for, versus efficiency, power usage, which is obviously, really important in a laptop. I've been complaining about my M4 MacBook Pro, M4 Pro, I should say, and how the battery life has been really unimpressive for a while, like since the beginning. And I had come from a MacBook Air, and I thought, well, is this the difference? Do I want the base chip and the MacBook Air, and that's like the most power efficient one, still pretty good for my needs. I got the M4 Pro, MacBook Pro, because I needed more storage space. That was the main thing, and some other benefits come with it. So the way I've mitigated just recently this power issue is I set it to always use low power mode when I'm on battery. So problem solved. I just don't get the benefit of the full speed and the kind of automatic switching to performance versus efficiency, et cetera. But it seems to solve the issue. And my theory is that there's some apps on my system that just by virtue of their being open, like especially certain web apps, I often have like the Unify portal open, that I've either been working on a client network and I have the Unify portal opened in a like a web app that's in my dock, so it's basically like a, purpose-built version of Safari just sitting there for the Unify portal. Just having that open over time seems to just like use processing power for no good reason, really. I wonder if it's things like that or other apps. Sometimes you can correlate it to what you see in the battery menu, and it'll show you, using significant energy, like which apps are doing that. Other times I don't seem to see anything in that menu, and it still seems to be draining fast. But yeah, the low power mode on battery seems to work. So I'm probably going to stick with this Mac for a little bit longer, even though I'm tempted to try the new Air out.
To comment on that, I think I mentioned this to you on the phone privately, but I listen to pretty faithfully Mac Break Weekly on a weekly basis. I kind of fast forward through it, like 1.7. I usually listen to it. And every time Andy Anako talks, I fast forward through all that. Not because I don't like Andy, but he goes on too long.
Sure.
But they recently added to the show Christina Warren, who's a big Mac fan person and columnist and pretty well known. And I've never paid attention to this in the past, and I'm sure it's been mentioned. But what she's talked about very, very specifically is the problems that you had. And because she has roughly a similar machine, or she's had it roughly the same size. And what she mentions was the thermals, and that the chassis itself is not big enough. So people don't have this problem with the larger MacBook Pro, but with the smaller MacBook Pro, it just can't. And so your CPU and your GPU is throttled back because of the thermal heat that's building up inside. And she says this definitively. And then I kind of have heard this a little bit more now that I've been kind of listening to this. So I would love to get a MacBook Pro, but I think for that very reason, it makes me want to stay away, because I definitely don't want to pay up and then get something that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Marginally better, 30, 40% better, but not like blow the doors off.
Right. Right. And I wasn't blown away by this Mac. I
Mm-hmm.
still have to restart like about as often as I did before. I thought, well, if the better, faster, beefier machine, maybe that'll be better. I don't notice like I'm not getting my work done faster. I mean, I'm just, it's
Right,
like,
right.
I mean, sure, I can, I have more memory, I have more storage, like I can multitask with more apps in theory. But I mean, unless you have a workflow that's going to benefit from that raw processing power, whether it's CPU or GPU, you're probably not going to notice a big improvement just by virtue of having the like beefier, hardware. And like you said, if that's true, that the 14-inch MacBook Pro, just by virtue of having less like thermal mass to kind of,
Mm-hmm.
expel
Dissipate the
heat,
heat. Yep.
dissipate the heat, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
then the MacBook Air, certainly at its size is a great option. I mean, you've got the 13-inch, right? I've
Yes.
had the 15-inch in the past. I mean, they just seem to be like a really great machine. Now we've got the Neo to throw into the mix, which is an interesting angle coming from because we're at a premium price point for our services. So I've been thinking like, does this really does this appeal to any of our clients? I mean, maybe for kids in school, like from the residential market, sure, I have no problem, recommending it
Mm-hmm.
as like a very entry level. It's obviously optimized for price, but not really any big compromises other than the low memory. That seems to be the kind of main thing. But throwing that one into the mix, I think, as an entry level machine, it'll probably just expand the market quite a bit, which may not expand. I think the thing is, it may not expand our market, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like clientele, unless maybe some of these big Windows focused companies start to switch to Mac because of the Neo getting a foot in the door. And maybe then that opens up, more clients for us on the business side. But yeah, what do you think about that wild card coming in?
It's possible. Device management for education, that sort of thing, open
Yeah.
up some opportunities. I was recently contacted by somebody down your neck of the woods, and they said something like they had a 500 or 700 piece deployment that they wanted to do. And
Wow.
every one of the school systems, like it must have been school wide. And it just sounded like everybody, because there were 3 people included on the email, and they had big ambitions, but it sounded like they wanted to have somebody give them a turnkey solution. And I said, well,
Hmm.
I'm not the person for that.
Hmm.
So,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's actually an interesting counterpoint. Is it may open up like really big opportunities, which are
right.
kind of outside of my sort of wheelhouse. I mean,
Yeah.
Sam, if he were here, might have a different opinion on that. I feel like he's a little bit more positioned for the larger deployments and experienced with that. But yeah, that would be something that would be a stretch for me to
Yeah.
try to
Oh
come in
yeah.
and do
I
something like
couldn't
that.
even wrap my head around it. And Sam's not here, so he loses out. So
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
who's
So you could have,
listening,
yeah,
yeah,
you could have
everybody's
handed that off
listening,
to him.
has
Yeah,
an
yeah.
opportunity to reach out to me privately if you're in
There you go.
Connecticut. But
Right.
Sam, he's not on the list. He
Yep.
doesn't come to the
Exactly.
show. He doesn't get the prize.
Right. That's right. Exactly. Um,
Before we leave, are
Go
you
ahead.
set to leave the Apple world for a little bit? I mean, we're going to still
Yeah.
talk about Apple, but
I have a gripe about Apple we could use as a maybe point of transition here,
it
unless
doesn't
you
have
wanted to.
anything to do with the consultant's locator, does it?
No, no, that's working totally fine
Okay.
for me. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you
Well, I
looked at it
mean,
recently? Have you looked at
yeah.
it recently? Seriously.
Well, I have to say I'm really happy in general with my referrals I'm getting from the stores directly. I have a couple of points of
Yeah.
contact that have referred
Excuse
some
me,
great.
folks. This is a hooray for Joe moment.
Hooray for me. I will admit. You know, I just feel lucky because I know that not everybody gets the same kind of treatment.
Right. But
I
I'm,
haven't worked.
yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about something else entirely. I'm
Yeah.
saying like basically like I don't know that I was
Couldn't
getting a lot
help
of
yourself. Just
referrals.
had to just talk about it and
Just pat
say how
myself on the
great.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I don't know that I was getting any referrals from the old Locator. Again, more direct from a couple of people in local stores. But I have heard some negative feedback about the new Apple Partner Network Locator, and including from a colleague of ours who had found me right before the transition, like reconnected, after, years, like we knew each other in the past. He found me through the consultant's locator, like to reconnect, and then went to find me again after the transition and said, this thing's a mess. Like if I wanted to find you using this thing, I wouldn't be able to. He's like, can you share that feedback with our with our Apple team there? And I thought, yeah, that's another interesting point. Is like literally in the field there, people are having trouble finding their way to people they know they're looking for, let alone like
Right.
someone, like a brand new client coming in trying to find
People
a
in the business.
consultant.
Well, they
Yeah.
revised it, to when they just a couple month ago or whatever,
Yeah.
technical partner locator or whatever you want to call it. But now, just within the last week, they revised it again. And
Okay.
so this is as timely as today. I just wanted to give this little tip to our listeners. If you're part of the ACN team, they're telling me that if you happen to locate yourself on the locator or the technical partner locator,
Yeah.
that the reviews, while they're still there, they're loading in the Apple consultants page. And some are surmising
Right.
that maybe the reviews are not going to appear at all, or they're being mishandled in some way. So my tip is, and it was brought up by Alexander Tilke. Excuse
Okay.
me if I'm mispronouncing your name. He's the CTO, Chief Technology Officer of Scout IT, also a sponsor of Command Control Power.
Hmm.
That And he used Claude for this. And interestingly, I tried ChatGPT and I also tried Perplexity. And the only person who could successfully do it was Claude. And what he suggested doing was saving the reviews. So at
Yeah.
least you could put some sort of a hidden private page on your website that you could send in an email to a person if they were pitching you
Hmm.
for client reviews. And Claude, you just you send it the link to your web page that shows the reviews
Right.
from the old consultants locator. You tell it to give me HTML code that you can upload to your website. So I did
Oh,
this
nice.
today, and Claude formatted it really nicely. And it was a great tip. So thank you very much for that. So if anybody's listening, capture them now while they're still there in case Apple decides, they're going to pull the plug on the reviews. And I was
That's a good point.
surprised. My
Yeah.
last review was 2023. I guess I'm getting
Hmm.
more of them now on Google. That's where I kind of direct people, because it was
Yeah.
really hard for people for a while, where they said like, oh, I tried to leave a review on the Apple Consultants Network and I couldn't do it or whatever. And so there were a couple that I didn't have them do or passed on it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not moving in a good direction. Let me just
Yeah.
say that about this.
Well, I mean, the main concern, and this is public knowledge here. You just go to, partnernetwork.apple.com. That's, now live, find a partner. It used to be, again, public knowledge. You could go to the old Consultants Network locator and you could search for, like if I'm a business, I'm searching for like, my location, right?
Your zip code.
Yeah, and that was like pretty early in the process. You didn't have to jump
Mm-hmm.
through too many hoops. You could select, I'm a business of like 0 to 99 people or something, and then
Mm-hmm.
pretty much the next step was to put in, like you said, a zip code or town or city, and you would get a map that would match based on the kind of geographical area. Now we would also joke about that, because if you're, if you know the geography of, Connecticut and, southern Fairfield County, right across Long Island Sound is Long Island. And so you
Mm-hmm.
would get results, if you're sitting there in, Bridgeport, Connecticut, where, Jerry's the closest, or maybe I'm second closest or whatever, you would get results that are, right alongside us that are on Long Island. As the crow flies, I mean, if we could all fly like a crow, like you could be there just as fast as Jerry could if you live on Long Island, if your consultancy is based on Long Island. But if you drive an automobile, like most people do, you have to, kind of wind your way all the way down Long Island, which is a long island. Imagine that. And so you're driving down this long island and then kind of around the horn to, to come navigate all the way up the coast of Connecticut to get to this potential business opportunities. So most of the people that you would call, even though they show up, on a number 1 or 2 on the list there, would decline the work if they have to make that kind of trek to get to the client. But at least it had geographic, like fuzzy area kind of matching. So you would be at the top or near the top of that list. Now you have to do exact zip code or city name matching. My test has always been put in the town where I grew up. That was, I've always, I go to the locator, I test it, where do I appear? I don't have an office in that town, but that's just the town where I grew up. That's where a lot of my clients have been traditionally over the years. And so I put that address in, either by zip code or the city name, town name. I put that town in now and I get no results. I mean, it won't even show me, it just won't refresh. Like you can't put in a zip code or a town name that doesn't have somebody physically in that exact place, not one town over. They have to be in that town. So, okay, I can find myself if I put in my like office address, location, but Sam doesn't appear on that list. So even though he's in the same town, so
is that because he didn't show up on the show tonight? Is that why?
There's a correlation there.
Oh, by the way, I prefer to fly like an eagle, not like a crow.
Okay.
I just wanted to tell you that.
Nice. Soar like an eagle. Yeah.
Please continue.
So yeah, I mean, Sam has his own, bone of contention there because, he's in theory in the same town, his business is always based like right in the same place as mine. And I show up and he doesn't, it's not, Apple's not doing me any special
Another
favors.
hooray for Joe moment, folks.
That's right. But again, it doesn't work great for me because, not all of my clients are in that exact city, right? Where I'm based. I mean, some of them are, imagine that, one town over. So they're not finding me. They're finding someone in Atlanta or, Illinois or whatever, because they're alphabetically sorted to the top of the list. So it just seems to me like there's some kinks to work out, and I'm assuming they will work those out. But it's
Apple's
surprising
trying, Joe.
they launched it.
They just need some more money, maybe.
Yeah.
They get a slightly bigger team to work on this.
Yeah. The team we all love, the team we all know and love, I think it's not like they're sitting there.
No, of course not.
Programming this and,
no.
They're plugged into a much bigger kind of engine of Apple. And like you said, that engine just needs more, coal shoveled into it in terms of like money being thrown at them because they don't have the resources. I mean, that's my cynical take, like yours, is like they, how many trillions do they need to be able to have like a, developer team that can achieve the goal of, at least feature parity with the old system.
But now,
a lot of people would,
yeah. But now it's like the consultants locator, the technical partner locator. It's like Google, people who sign up for Gmail for free. So it's free. So they lost your email. You get what you get and you don't get upset.
Exactly. Because we're not paying for that,
we're not paying for it so
anymore.
All bets are off.
Yeah.
So we can't complain.
We could complain about also the fact that Mac OS, still has, bugs appearing and things when, Apple's probably suffering from this less than most companies. They're suffering from it some though, in terms of just like not having the right like array of developers to keep up with this stuff. But a lot of companies are solving that problem using vibe coding AI, and it shows. I mean, you're seeing more and more like crazy bugs. We went through this with Microsoft last year with their auto update, process just breaking, with their updater, renaming apps and doing all kinds of like crazy stuff where it's like, who is running the show over there? So maybe this is the least of our worries. It's just, it is a big worry for a lot of people being affiliated with Apple in this way and wanting to trust that, Apple is stewarding this program properly and making sure that, we're still going to appear in search results when clients are trying to find us,
Yeah. I don't know.
I had a different Apple gripe though. That was a good gripe though, Jerry. I appreciate that because that's definitely a thing. And that is, I think more so even a useful tip in terms of preserving those reviews, which, before they potentially go away, it's nice to have a record of that and maybe use that on your
I texted it to you. I don't know. You're the fancy pants here with the using Slipstream, whatever the hell we use for doing this video.
Yeah.
You could share that snapshot if you wanted to, or the page, but.
Yeah, I will attempt to do that live.
right.
Yeah, this is pretty cool, man. So you had this got spit out by
Claude.
ChatGPT, Claude. You said Claude, yeah.
Yeah, the other ones.
Interesting.
It's interesting because ChatGPT and Perplexity, they all had the same URL, which showed all the reviews, and the other two gacked and said, we can't show the URLs, or we can't do this. And Claude was like, sure.
That's really
there you
interesting.
go. Look at that.
Yeah, so this is a really cool result here. So you've got your 5-star review in the top right based on 61 reviews. So this looks very similar to kind of the way Apple would have positioned it on the old Apple Consultants locator.
Hmm.
You've got your client whose name is quote MacWorks fan, another client listed there, and they have their they recommend this consultant. There's the date of the review. You've got the I had an email issue that couldn't be resolved through the email provider. I reached out to MacWorks, and within less time than I spent on the phone with my email provider, it was fixed. Incredible service.
Wow. Wow.
All 5 stars: responsiveness, value, expertise. So you've basically Claude has kind of redone the layout of what the old Apple Consultants Network locator had, to be able to preserve these reviews. And it's a really great idea, because I was
Yeah.
linking to my page from my website, which had the reviews. And at some point, like you said, this will go away maybe sooner than later. So
It might go away, or it may be transferred over. But right now, like I
yeah.
said, if you go there, it dumps you into the old consultants locator review page. And so again, thanks to Alexander Tilke of Scout IT.
Mm-hmm. Excellent tip. So my gripe about Apple is, how many freaking times do I have to see the welcome to Mac screen? Why does this screen show up every time I install a minor point update? I see this when I sometimes oversee updates for clients. So I'm using Adigy Live Desktop to remote in and do an update. Then in some cases, and I forget which, maybe it's with a Sequoia update, you'll see the Apple Intelligence screen every
Hmm.
point update. So you
Yeah.
go from 15, 7.3 to 15.8.7.4, whatever it is, and you see, hey, by the way, do you want to try Apple Intelligence? Still no. For a lot of my clients, I just opted them out, because they sort of just get confused and don't really get a lot of benefit from it, unless they say otherwise. And if I'm handling it, I'll just continue to opt them out. But yeah, I'm being welcomed to Mac. Well, first I'm being presented with Apple Intelligence, and then I'm being welcomed to Mac every time. And I think those things are connected. There didn't used to be this splash screen of welcome to Mac, click continue. It
Hmm.
would just go to your desktop. Like your welcome, your welcome into the Mac is just to be brought to your desktop so you can continue working. It's an extra click. I mean, what would Steve Jobs do? We used to reference him all the time. And, one thing was a lesson in the early days of the Mac was, like, if you save somebody 1 second, right, times a million users, you're saving a certain number of person hours in the life of the human civilization. So if you're costing somebody 1 second every time you, do an update on their system, to bother to move the mouse down to click continue every time, it just seems like a waste of time. So this was on my list to complain about, basically. Then it actually impacted a client. So I had a client who has a couple of different offices. They use a laptop from home. They have an iMac in the studio at one location. They have two different like studio locations. And they tried to get into the iMac in the studio where they're running QuickBooks, and they like need to be able to get in to share the screen using Splashtop.
Hmm.
And they called me saying, "Hey, I don't know if there's anything you can do. Like, I'm not able to connect to that Mac, and Splashtop says it's just not online and whatever. Is there anything you can do? This will save me a trip, like an hour drive to go there and an hour back." And so I said, yeah, let me see. So sure enough, it was showing online in Adigy to the rescue. Live desktop, no problem. I got right in, and what do I see? Apple Intelligence prompt and welcome to Mac.
Hmm.
And why did I see that? Because an auto update had happened the night before. So apparently, and I didn't realize this was the case, I'm not sure if it's always the case, but Splashtop was not able to like make the Mac available to the remote user on Splashtop. They use it internally, to connect, until I
That's
just said,
common.
okay, let's go. Yeah. So I mean, that's really annoying. That's a real
Hmm.
impact for people. So apparently, I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, but that's like me. I know, like, with, again, automated device enrollment and certain other things, you can skip the setup screens, certain
Hmm.
ones. So maybe there's a
Yeah,
way
of
to turn that
course.
off, permanently on a Mac. But yeah, it's just, it was an example of like Apple actively causing a negative impact for a client just to promote their own services, to promote Apple Intelligence, and for whatever reason, this continue button is.
And it's not even um, an impressive welcome screen. It's the crayon
No.
drawing that
Yeah.
it's. I don't know who loves that on the executive team, but this must be some sort, like I said, an executive decision to perpetuate this after every little point release, because I agree, it's just another annoyance, but I go through that every single day on this using Tahoe with annoyances and the previous operating system and the previous operating system before that. And it's just,
well, we may get our snow Tahoe release apparently, right? I mean, that's the rumors, is that they'll do no new features like they did for the Snow Leopard release, which, by the way, as several people have pointed out, including I think Howard, Dr. Howard, help
Oakley.
me out here, Jerry. Thank you. Dr. Howard Oakley, who we've had on the show, eclecticlightcompany.co. I think he and others have pointed out that actually Snow Leopard did have some pretty big new features, in fact, even though we all remember it as this big announcement that there would be no new features and Apple would just work on stability. Whatever. I mean, we want them to do that. We want them to work on stability and no new features, and fix some of these bugs, fix, the visual like glitches and things like that, software compatibility. I feel like lately I'm just more annoyed with all my devices very regularly. Like everything seems to take more taps on the phone, or it's missing the first tap or something when I'm trying. I can't quite explain it, but it's just not as sort of fluid as I like once felt on the iPhone. On the Mac, there's often, this I thought was part of a beta cycle, but it's just still a persistent issue. Like when I command tab over to my Messages app and I've got the thread open there and I want to just start typing because I see the blinking cursor, it starts bonking at me, bump, because I'm typing into nothing. I'm typing into a modal dialogue apparently, but there is a blinking cursor, but I have to actually click where the cursor is and then I can type. Just little paper cuts like that, and I would just like to see them just do a full accounting of all these little issues and just fix them. That would be a great release,
That would be.
Yeah. Nobody's asking for like new OSs every year. I have clients who are telling me like, why do we have to go through this cycle every freaking year? Like,
you don't want 100 new features on your, in October, September, October?
Mean, I'll take 10 new features, I don't know. It's like, I mean, listen, the features are great too. Like iPhone mirroring came out last release, Sequoia. Great release. I think the Passwords app came to the Mac in Sequoia. Great new features. Like, I'm not complaining about the new features. The new features are great. I wish they didn't come at the expense of just little regressions in the way that these OSs work for me, when I'm just trying to work efficiently. And I just find it's it's just problematic more than it ever was. I'm not the first or the last to say that for sure. So
speaking of problematic devices, I was out of town. I needed some directions. I got off the highway and I had the phone on the little magnetic thing in the car. You're looking at the Waze directions to get there. And somehow I opened up the control screen, what do we call this?
Control center.
Control center. And I inadvertently flipped the brightness all the way down.
Sure.
Off, so I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Like completely off.
Were you wearing sunglasses at the time driving?
That caused me to flip it all the way off, or no? It was
no. I just mean so I've had that where when it's all the way down, like to me indoors normally I can still see it, but when you're outside, when it's all the way down, it's certainly a lot harder to see, but especially if you have polarized sunglasses.
Yeah, I didn't.
There's some effect there where it dims.
From some reason, this went to full dimness. Now, maybe if I was 17 years old, I'd be able to see it.
Sure.
But at my ripe old age, I couldn't read it, and so silly me, I could have said, "Hey Siri, turn up the brightness on the phone," and it would have done that.
Good call.
However, silly me, I rebooted my phone, and that made it even worse.
Oh, sure, because now you got to put in your passcode with no screen while you're careening down the highway at 75.
Well, I had stopped by this point, but I needed to know where to go from getting off the exit. So what I had to do was I had to go into a filling station and ask to use the restroom. And went in the restroom, locked the door, turned out the lights.
Nice. Yeah.
And then
And
I
then
could see
cried for
it.
a while. Is that what you? Oh, and then you
No,
could
no,
see the
no.
phone. Yeah, I got
And
it.
then
Yeah.
I could finally see the screen.
I figured you would say that. Yeah, that's the trick. Yep. Because I mean, at night when it's super dark, I'm in bed or whatever.
Mhm.
I will often turn it all the way down if I'm watching YouTube or I'm
Right.
just reading a news article or something. Like I don't want to ruin my night vision or just like make whatever make it harder to sleep.
Mhm.
So I will use it at that lowest possible brightness. And I've even said in the past, you can go lower in accessibility settings under the display section. You can, I think, reduce the white point, which will actually
Mhm.
like dim the screen even more, which, yeah, could be even worse in your situation there. But that's a good call to go into the restroom and turn off the light. That's
Right. So don't reboot your phone, friends.
while driving, yeah, or
Yeah.
yeah. Oh man, let that be a lesson. But you're right. You could have said, "Dear Siri, please
Yeah.
turn up the brightness." That
That's
would have been a
right.
good call. Now
It
you
would have
know.
worked.
I should have known this.
So do you have anything to share? Because I've got one little interesting tidbit. It has to do with texting.
Share away. Let's hear about it. Yeah, texting is
Okay.
always a fun topic for
Sure.
me.
Well, and I want you to explain to the listeners how you do it, but
Sure.
you use RingCentral and
Mm-hmm.
I use RingCentral.
Yep.
And I use the texting that's available in RingCentral, and it's not an issue for me because it's a one-to-one relationship. There are
Right.
no other people on my air quotes team,
Yeah.
but you have other people, and that's always been problematic. So you've
That's right.
added, I don't want to speak for
Yeah,
you, but you
I
added a
had to add a
bolt-on
third
product.
party. Yeah, I had to add
Yeah.
B texting, which is RingCentral sells this as like advanced SMS inbox
Right.
because they promised to have an advanced SMS inbox for a number of years and never got around to like actually implementing it until they just released this as their supported solution. It's really more of a a marketing, like text message marketing service and things like that. You can do a lot more with it than I'm using it for, but it does give us the ability, Tim and I, to share an inbox, which has opened up for me the possibility of actually texting for a lot more uses. I mean, it's really convenient when you have one of these migration projects like we talked about earlier, and you just need to coordinate, when is this going to be finished with the client? People, I would send emails and they would eventually read them and reply and whatever, but text is just faster. Most people
Yep.
just respond much more quickly to text. So it's really helpful for that.
It's very efficient. So when you signed up for this service, did you run into any kind of a policy that you had to put in place for opting out? Because you know how that's here in the United States, they're rolling out this, they're making carriers have their customers like ourselves, like you, Joe, abide by these opportunities to opt out, and what exactly your policies are. What happened when you signed up for that service?
Well, I had already jumped through some of those hoops with RingCentral, thinking maybe this will let me be able to simply text. The problem was I couldn't text from my company phone number. Like we could text from each of our individual extensions, and the text message comes from the extension, which is okay, but that's not what we really want. We want to share an inbox, and we want to use the main company number. So I tried to go through the process of registering for business SMS, and you have to create a brand, like, so okay, that's my company name and whatever, and then a campaign, and it's like, I'm not doing a campaign, but okay, sure, I'll call it a campaign. And the campaign is when somebody texts me and says, hey, can you help me with this problem? The campaign is I write back, yes, I can. Like, it doesn't really, the terminology doesn't really apply to like the way that I actually use this, but I understand it's obviously trying to just put some guardrails in place so that people don't abuse, the SMS network and the system. So I had done that, and then I signed up for B texting, and I can't remember if I had to also go through it with them. I think that the fact that I had this already kind of on file in RingCentral directly allowed me to just sort of, since they're integrated, like use that. But yeah, they took over the ability to send from my RingCentral company phone number is what ended up happening there.
Right. So I noticed that in RingCentral, you can put in an opt-out box now when you text directly from RingCentral. So I thought that covered it. And all of a sudden one day I can still receive incoming texts to my MacWorks main number, but I can't text them back. So I contacted RingCentral, and we talked to people, I think primarily who are in the Philippines, and they're very good at what they do.
Yeah.
There's certainly English is not their first language. And I had to add to my website at the very bottom, or you could put it anywhere really, terms of service and my
Yes.
privacy policy.
I had to do the same.
So
Yep.
I created separate pages just like you did. And this is off in the weeds a little bit, but I always, when I report my tax, because I'm a sub S corp, it goes down my personal tax. So I don't have an EIN number. I use my social security number. So I had to reach out to the IRS and get an EIN number, which wasn't any problem to do that. It's actually very easy to do. I don't know if you're compelled to have to use it, but now it's associated with my business. So that's great.
Nice.
And then I had to redo my contact page because I wasn't collecting phone numbers before. I didn't need to. I didn't want them to, but they want to see you have on your contact page a place for people to put their phone number, and then an opt-out box.
Exactly right. Yep.
So, and you know this. So I had to redo that page. I got that all done.
Yep.
2 days, like when I talked to the agent, I did everything. And the 2 days before I got my EIN number, I go to submit it and it gets rejected because the EIN number is too new and it's not in their system yet. So I'm still waiting to be able to free up and be able to text out.
So you still can't text out? Oh God.
Yeah. I mean, I do have one business associated number, which is normally an internal number that people can message me back and forth, or I can message them. So it's not like I've had to use my private cell phone, but it's an annoyance. And like you said, I understand the reasoning for it with the guardrails, and it's good that people do this, but it's definitely, as you know, it was jumping through a lot of hoops to satisfy their criteria.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, I wish that they just gave me an option at the beginning, like, I will not send bulk messages,
Right.
Agree. Like, okay, done. But yeah, I had to do, I mean, in retrospect, I actually really appreciate that this was my kind of, impetus to set up a privacy policy and in terms of service. And I at that time I was using ChatGPT more, and I used ChatGPT to help me develop that and, create these pages. And I used actually Termly, I think, is the site for the for the privacy policy. So Termly is a service you can pay for, and they want you to believe that you have to pay monthly or yearly to maintain your terms of service because it's a moving target, apparently. And I think some of it's true, like maybe laws are changing. Like this one came up, in the last couple of years or whatever. I'm sure there are laws that are changing along the way, and Termly will keep your terms of service in compliance or keep your privacy policy in compliance. But basically what I did there was they also have a free option. You just, go through their hoops and you give them some of your basic info, including how you use client info and whether you store client info or not, or which types of info and things. And then Termly will generate your privacy policy. And in my case, I just copied and pasted it from there to my site and reformatted it and all. I had to add a section there specifically about, text messages and things to incorporate that. And then, like you said earlier, also the terms of service. That became really useful for because I don't think I initially needed a separate terms of service when I was doing the RingCentral, business SMS setup. But I needed the terms of service for Stripe. Like when I was setting up to receive ACH payments, I thought, let me have them agree to my terms of service. And so I used ChatGPT to help me create that one. And those are two separate pages. And like you said, I had to add also to my contact form. I was collecting phone numbers and thought it was kind of implied, like if somebody's giving me their phone number that, I can use it. But of course it makes sense that they don't necessarily you see this message all the time. Do you want a reminder text, about your upcoming doctor's appointment or whatever? And by the way, you may be charged per message or whatever, depending on your carrier policy. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. But it's been a long time since most carriers charged 10 cents per text or whatever. And I'm not really going to worry about 10 cents when the doctor costs, hundreds or something. So anyway, but you have seen this, and that's something I can understand why we need to actually, I added a field, text messages, SMS, okay to text for support. It's a checkbox in Squarespace. So the client can check, they can opt in essentially rather than opting out. And that gets reported to me as part of my contact form. To me, again, I would never text the client directly unless they contacted me first. So if I could have just agreed at the beginning of this whole thing, like I will not send mass texts and I'm only going to reply to people that text me, like what's the harm in that? You know, it seems like
Yeah.
somebody could have like said, hey, when we're creating this whole infrastructure around business SMS, can't we just start at the beginning and say, if you're like a mom and pop shop here and you're just casually texting with people that are, you know, your customers already or prospects, like you're just not going to abuse the system. And also like it's not up to me to take them out of the system if they write back one of those keywords like stop, you know, you have to stop texting them. I'm pretty sure that's handled by the carrier. Like,
Hmm.
in other words, like RingCentral will not let me text them if they say stop. You know,
Hmm.
it's kind of handled on the back end. So it's not like I needed to like implement something for that. So it just seems a lot overblown. So yeah, that's an interesting thing that you brought up because that's been clearly a lot of hoops that we both had to jump through.
Yeah. Well, still waiting, but I'm ready to go. I'm all dressed up and know where to go, Joe.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait for your first text after all of this. You know, what's it going to be? What emojis are you going to use? You must be like thinking about, you know, how exciting this is. You get to text
Mm,
from your main number at that point.
pinch me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. Unless you had something very nice, you could throw up that picture I texted you a little earlier, and maybe we could.
No, you're
Maybe you
throwing a
could
lot
tell
of
the.
wild cards in this one here. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's see. So this is an Amazon screenshot here.
Yeah.
Let's see what this does for us here. So um, maybe you want to describe this as I'm clicking. I'm clicking.
Well, what Joe's putting up on the screen is a bill of goods that was just delivered to my doorstep for a job that I'm doing Saturday morning, and it's a respirator cartridge filters, specifically the P100s, a 3M rugged comfort latch half face piece reusable respirator,
Nice.
dual goggles, clear anti-fog, dual mold safety goggles, Clorox hydrogen peroxide cleaner disinfectants, and a hazmat suit.
Are you sure you're not a prepper? I know you've been accusing me of, you know, being in the prepper world lately, but the 3M, I have to say, I've encountered these products on Amazon as, you know, something you might want if, you know, I mean, around here, like we've talked about, even just fire, you know, I think this would be good potentially
Right.
in case there's like smoke in the air and I want to go for a walk. But what the heck kind of tech job do you have cooking here, Jerry, with all this stuff?
Well, interestingly, those respirator cartridges, and they're replaceable. So depending on what type of work you do, I didn't know about any of this. The
Yeah,
3M face piece, you can put these cartridges on the side, and if you're like
right.
taking drywall off, you would use a different type of respirator.
I see.
But
Okay.
this one is I'm cleaning out mouse stuff in a in a
Yuck.
network closet.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm taking this network down, and it got so bad where I suggested to the client, I said, look, we got to do something about these mice. And if
Yeah.
anybody else took over my job, they would take one look in this closet and they'd go like, who the hell was doing this work for you? Like, what kind of a company would
Yeah.
allow this to happen?
Hmm.
And
That's
they're
really
out.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they're out in the woods, and it was embarrassing for me. It's my reputation. So,
Yeah.
you know, why am I doing it? Well, because I'm going to charge them for it. And
Yeah.
secondly, there's no one else I would want handling the equipment. So there's a couple of network attached storage devices. There's a couple of Mac minis. It's all together, and there's rack
Wow.
mounted items. So rather than them mess around, I just decided I would take the network down. And you're not supposed to, when cleaning up mouse feces, let's call it what it is,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not supposed to vacuum, because that aerates, or that
Right.
puts the, yeah, in the air. So you have to have
Oof.
the right kind of respirator to do the filtering. And they said to take damp wipes and to wipe it
Okay.
up with and use gloves. I've got gloves, so
Wow.
they didn't need to be on the list, but of course I'm going to be using disposable gloves. So
Definitely.
there you go.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that explains it. Yeah. And I could
Yeah.
imagine you not wanting to hire some random cleaning company to come in and just, you know, have at it and potentially like, you know, kick a computer or disconnect something or, you know, and give you more work to do on the other end of it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it makes sense to handle it yourself. You could have also just slapped a sticker up there, you know, stop. not managed by MacWorks because, like disavow this whole thing. Like, this is not my work here, guys.
That's
Like
right.
but yeah, it reminds me of this story of when, like I heard the story of a family friend whose doctor said, like, they were threatening to basically drop the person as a patient because the patient just wouldn't follow any advice, and so it sort of like looks bad on the doctor if like the patient is getting less and less healthy over time. And
Hmm.
so I think the doctor was sort of like, well, why would I want to like have you as a patient if you make me look bad, essentially. It's kind of the
Yeah.
same thing. So like I could see you eventually just walking away if they weren't willing to hire you for this, for this work to clean this up, because yeah, it just looks neglected over time. And you're certainly not going to want to go in there and, redo any cabling or clean anything up or swap out a Mac Mini with, rat mouse feces all over the place. So
Right.
I,
And I guess
I see how you
it's
got there.
the hantavirus is what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah.
HPS, hantavirus pulmonary syndrome.
Yuck. Yeah.
And
Don't
it's
want that.
mostly deer mice in the US. So, like I mentioned, this is in a rural area. So, I'm
Right.
sure they have their deer mice
Sure.
aplenty.
Yep.
So, you think you got it bad?
Yeah, really. Look at this. If anyone out there is listening and not looking, I mean, you can see Jerry's Amazon screenshot here, and it's
I'll
not
take a
exactly the
picture.
yeah, it's not usually the type of things you find in a tech person's Amazon cart. So
What's in your bag?
yeah,
A
yeah.
hazmat suit.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, don't leave home without it. Wow.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, good luck with that one. Stay
Thank you.
safe, and swap those filters as needed. And yeah, it sounds gross, and I'm glad you're going to be prepared for that one.
Yeah. It's not, if you really want to know, it's not as bad as it seems. It's like a small they're trace amounts, but there's enough there that you just don't want to go in there anymore.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's enough to be worth dealing with. So
Yeah.
good on you, man. Well, good talking to you, Jerry. Good recording with you. I hope people enjoyed the show. And if you want more episodes before the next episode comes out, make sure to check us out on Patreon. We've got a lot more content there. If you're not yet a Patreon supporter, I'm sure you've heard me mention it and all of us mention it before, but there's a lot more content there. And we really do think, that's useful, actionable, helpful information, especially one of our most recent episodes we got some good feedback about. It was a conversation with Jason Wick and Benjamin Morales relating to AI, and just how to navigate that conversation with your clients and how to navigate it also with your team of people if you're on a team, and just kind of grappling with these really big societal topics that we often gloss over as we're just singing the praises of how we use AI. It's certainly a useful tool, but there's a lot more to consider there, and we talk a lot more about it on that Patreon episode. So check
That's
us
right.
out at commandcontrolpower.com. Click on support and support us on Patreon to get instant access to all that stuff. Thanks very much for listening to Command Control Power. We'll talk to you again in a week.